welcome to NewBlueFX Tips and Techniques. This is Ian Stark for NewBlue. In this tutorial, I'm going to shed some light on the Light Rays plugin from NewBlue's Light Effects collection. At first glance, you'd expect Light Rays to give you, well, light rays. But if you look a little deeper and start to experiment with the controls, you'll find that this is a very flexible plugin that can really spice up footage and text in ways that perhaps you wouldn't expect. We'll be working through some of these examples as I introduce you to the controls in the Light Rays plugin. One area where you might often find yourself using Light Rays is in your titles and other on-screen text. Let's look at the Apache helicopter title screen again. We're just interested in the text here, although I've used other NewBlue plugins to treat the footage of the helicopter to give me a nice dark background to work with. So let's start to explore the various controls in Light Rays. The plugin is separated into four areas: Light Source, Light Rays, Shimmer, and Mix. The Light Source group of controls lets you set up the intensity and shape of the light source. The Light Rays group lets you choose colours for the rays and to determine their angle and their length. The Shimmer group sets up random noise which makes the rays flicker and move. Finally, the Mix group lets you determine how much of the underlying image you want to show, how bright you want the rays to be, and whether you want to mangle the original image into something that's barely recognisable. We'll start by resetting the plugin to 0 values, and I do this by selecting the Reset to None preset. In order to see any effect on your footage, there are three controls that need to have values. Those are Radius, Length, and Rays. I'll explain them all in more detail in a second. So let's go back and work our way through each control. First off, we have the light source colour. Typically for a bright light this will be white, but you can choose any colour for interesting results, even dark colours. Note that this is the colour of the light source, not the rays themselves. Sensitivity sets the strength of the light source, and in effect it increases the portion of the image that will be considered a light source. The position and radius controls define a circular area within the image that can generate light. Feather softens both the edge of that circle as well as the edges of the light rays. Let's introduce some movement into the rays by setting the shimmer controls. We'll set size to 65, intensity to 85, and rate to 30. The rate determines how quickly the shimmer moves from one random noise to another. You can see that's now broken up the light rays and it's looking much more interesting. I'm going to go back now and tweak the light source a little. Let's increase sensitivity to around 65, and let's drag the source position down until the rays appear to be coming straight towards us out of the frame. Although I'm happy with the radius, let's have a look at what happens when I adjust it. At 0 the light source circle disappears, and at 100 it includes everything, in this case all the text. And remember, we're only affecting the text layer here, not the image behind it. I'm going to set it to around 50. The feather control softens the edges of the circle and the rays, which I don't want for this title text. But this is what happens if I turn feather up full. I want it set to 0 so it looks a little sharper. Now I'm quite happy with the colour of the rays as they are, so I won't change them in this example. We'll look at changing the colours a little later. I'm going to leave the mix set to 0 as well. Remember that for this title I want the rays to come out of the screen directly towards me, but if I wanted to angle the light rays I'd use the angle control. You can set some really cool sweeping results when you keyframe the angle values. For now I'm going to set both X and Y positions to 0. Changing the length of the rays is also very easy. Here's what they'll look like at 100, and of course they'll disappear at 0. We'll set them to a value of 50 as well. Okay, I think we're pretty close. All I want to do now is to reduce the brightness of the rays so that the underlying text is a little clearer. And I do that with the rays control in the mix group. Much better. We'll look at the picture mix control in a different example. Okay, let's turn to using light rays on an image. Here I've got a picture taken inside a church, exposed just so the windows can be seen. Let's apply the Light Rays plugin and make a few really simple changes to the default values. First, I'm going to change the angle of the rays so it looks like they're coming from the sun on a late summer afternoon. Then I'll change the length. And that's pretty much all I need to do to transform an ordinary picture into something much more special. To finish it off, let's warm things up a touch. I'll select a yellow colour for the brighter rays and an orange colour for the less bright rays. And when I start to mix the colours in with the original, it really begins to glow with a much nicer sunlight quality. It even gives the impression that the sun is streaming through the trees outside. That gives it that nice movement. And that's all with just a few clicks. For my next example, we'll do something clever with the picture mix value to generate a cool, or rather a hot, background for a title plate. Let's first set up some rays on this very underexposed footage of a crane. I'm doing this fairly arbitrarily, although what I'm trying to end up with is something that looks hot, so my most important tweaks are the colours of the rays. We'll choose yellow and red, and we'll mix those in. I want lots of movement, so I'll dial in some shimmer. Great. Now, the thing is, the crane has nothing whatsoever to do with my title plate, so I'm going to lose it by setting the picture mix value to 0. That completely removes the original image and sets up a transparency so that anything behind it will show through. Now I can drop some text in with a keyframed light ray sweep, and my titles are off to a flying start. Let's look at one of the more wacky ways we can use light rays. Here's some rather uninteresting footage, and I want to make it look a little bit otherworldly. So let's quickly set up some rays. I'll add just a little shimmer, and we'll leave the mix values as they are. Now here's where things get really interesting. Tucked away at the bottom of the plugin is a checkbox called Setup. Setup makes it easier to design your light source because it only highlights the area of your image that will generate rays, not the rays themselves. But as an added bonus, it can give you some pretty cool results as well. Watch what happens when I select Setup now. Fantastic. Finally, here's a really neat way you can use light rays to create directional, narrow beams of light to simulate a torch, a laser beam, or in this case, a lighthouse. Here's a still picture of a lighthouse to which I'm going to apply a day for night look using NewBlue's Film Look plugin. You can find out all about Film Look in one of the other tips and techniques tutorials in the library. Okay, that looks sufficiently nighttime-ish. Let's load up light rays and change some settings to simulate a beam from the lighthouse. I'm going to set sensitivity, feather, length and rays to maximum. Then I'm going to reduce the radius to just 0.5 so it almost disappears. Now is a very good time to turn on the setup function so I can see where my light source actually is. And now using the position controller I can fix the source on the top of the lighthouse. Now I'll turn setup off again, mix in the light ray colours. And now that I've set up my light source, which is going to be consistent throughout the entire clip, I can set up my first keyframe. The first keyframe has the rays pointing as far to the left of the frame as possible. Now I'll set a keyframe at the end of the clip, and if we run the clip, you can see how it sweeps across the frame. Let's add in a flare at the point where the light beam points directly at us. We can easily do that by choosing the midpoint and adding a keyframe there, and also one just before and one just after. Reselect your middle keyframe and set the radius to about 30. And there you go. We'll add in a vignette, courtesy of NewBlue's Video Essentials 2 collection, a layer of fog that I just happen to have lying around, and some text. I think that looks great. So there you have it. The Light Rays plugin from NewBlue is an amazingly versatile tool that you can apply to text or graphics to add some very cool lighting effects in post-production. This is one of those wonderful plugins that you just have to experiment with, and I hope you have as much fun with it as I did. To find other tips and techniques tutorials, or to learn more about Light Rays or any of NewBlue's other plugins, click to www.newbluefx.com. This is Ian Stark saying thanks for watching and for learning a little bit about NewBlueFX. Competitively priced, aesthetically fresh, and ridiculously easy to use.